Olivia had long believed that the most difficult pain to endure was physical. She thought of labor contractions, sleepless nights with a fever, or even the time she cut herself while cooking and needed stitches. But that belief changed completely in a single night, with a single sentence. That night, during the infamous family dinner, she realized that nothing hurts more than being betrayed by those who are supposed to protect you. Olivia had spent days preparing every detail. The flawless table, the dishes with that homemade yet elegant touch, the warm lighting. She even ironed the white linen tablecloth that she only used on special occasions. Everything was set to show once again that she deserved to be there, seated with or without approval. The house smelled of rosemary and freshly baked bread. George, her son, slept in the adjacent room, unaware of everything. Jared's family occupied the long dining table, in-laws in the center. Daisy, the sister-in-law, always ready to wound with a smile, sitting right across from Olivia, and Jared, as always, by her side, but emotionally miles away. The atmosphere was one of feigned cordiality, hiding knives beneath the napkins. Then, between one toast and another, Daisy threw her dart. Funny how George doesn't look anything like Jared, isn't it? She said it lightly, as if it were just a passing comment, but the intention gleamed in her eyes. Jared not only didn't defend her, he took a sip of wine, smiled, and added, "Maybe Olivia's hiding a secret." Everyone's laughter drowned out the sound of the fork she dropped onto the plate. Inside, Olivia froze. It wasn't rage, not even immediate sadness. It was a mix of disbelief and emptiness. It hadn't been just a phrase, it had been the confirmation that in front of everyone, she was worth less than a cruel joke. No one at the table said anything to stop it. No one noticed how her hands trembled as she tried to pick up the fork. Her father-in-law avoided her gaze. Her mother-in-law smiled awkwardly. And Jared was already talking about something else, as if nothing had happened. Olivia stood up with a strange calm, almost automatically, and said she was going to check if the baby was still asleep. No one worried, not a single question, not a gesture of support. She climbed the stairs slowly, but each step was a scream growing inside her. When she reached the room, she didn't look at the crib. She went straight to the closet. Inside, well hidden among documents and old pediatrician instructions, was the sealed envelope with the logo of the genetic clinic. Olivia had done the test in silence months ago, when Jared's doubts started to appear between the lines, in the long silences and poorly disguised jokes. She had carefully collected everything herself: Jared's hairbrush, the swab with George's saliva. She paid in cash, used an alternate address, to ensure he would never find out. She had kept that envelope like a life insurance policy, hoping never to need it. But now, it would be the final word. She walked down the stairs with the envelope in her hand, unhurried, not seeking drama. No one seemed to notice her return until she sat back in her place and placed the envelope directly in front of Jared on the white tablecloth. Her voice was calm, almost indifferent, but carried a tension that electrified the air. "Since we're sharing secrets tonight," she said. The room fell silent. Daisy lowered her glass. Jared frowned. No one moved as he slowly opened the envelope, as if sensing that what was inside couldn't be undone. When he read the laboratory heading, the color drained from his face. The result was clear: paternity confirmed at 99.99%. There was no room for doubt. For a few seconds, the dining room was paralyzed. No one dared breathe. Olivia looked at him steadily, without a tear, without a tremor. She didn't need to shout. Everything had already been said. While you were making jokes, I was carrying suspicions. I never deserved, she stated firmly, before sitting back down. Jared's eyes remained fixed on the paper, as if he could change the result by sheer will. It was then that the others began to understand the true weight of what had just happened. It wasn't just a lab result. It was the full exposure of the humiliation Olivia had endured in silence for so long. Jared's mother was the first to break the silence, murmuring something about misunderstandings and how did we get here. But Olivia didn't look away. She wasn't seeking comfort or a rushed apology. What she wanted was for all of them to face, for once, the consequences of their complicity. Because no one had defended her dignity. Because all of them, in one way or another, had allowed doubt to be cast upon her. Even Jared's father, always so restrained, dared to quietly say that this got out of hand. But it was no longer about hands. It was about respect. About everything they had taken from her while pretending to be courteous. Daisy tried to laugh again in a desperate attempt to divert attention, but her voice sounded hollow. No one joined in this time. Olivia looked at her with the calm of someone who no longer feels fear. If you have anything else to say about my son, now's the time, she said without raising her voice. Daisy lowered her eyes, nervous. For the first time, the confidence with which she always moved through that house had vanished. Olivia didn't need to yell or shed dramatic tears. Her strength now came from somewhere else, from the fact that finally she had stopped begging for acceptance. Jared still hadn't said a word. He was holding the envelope as if its weight alone kept him from moving. Olivia looked at him one last time, not with sadness, but with a cold clarity he couldn't withstand. You knew this took away your right to laugh, she said, standing once more, slowly picking up the napkin from her lap. The sentence wasn't meant to hurt. It was simply the truth. He had doubted her from the beginning, even when watching her sleep with their newborn in her arms. He had doubted and chosen his sister's poisonous whisper over trust in the woman he had built a family with. Without another word, Olivia walked toward George's room. She found him awake, moving his tiny hands in the crib as if he knew something important had just happened. She lifted him gently, kissed his forehead, and held him close to her chest. From the bedroom window, the confused murmur of the living room could still be heard, but she was no longer listening. In that moment, Olivia made a silent decision. She would no longer live in a house where her worth depended on how much she pleased others. If staying meant slowly disappearing, then leaving was the better choice. That same night, after putting George to bed, Olivia did what she had feared for years. She began to pack. It wasn't a dramatic escape, nor an act of rebellion. It was organization, determination. She packed only what was necessary: clothes for both of them, documents, the notebook where she kept all of the child's medical appointments, and the DNA test results. Everything else could stay. She checked the diaper bag, secured the powdered milk and diapers. She looked at herself in the hallway mirror for a second and barely recognized the woman staring back. Not because of her physical appearance, her tied-back hair, or tired eyes, but because she finally saw firmness in her own gaze. At 2 in the morning, she left a note on the dining room table. I need space. I'm leaving with George for a few days. Don't look for me unless you're truly willing to change. There were no reproaches, no threats. It was a declaration of boundaries. Olivia knew that returning was not an obligation, and that continuing in that marriage now depended on concrete choices, not easy apologies. As she buckled the baby's car seat and drove out of the garage, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time, peace. The early morning air was cold, but a serene warmth filled her chest. She hadn't won a fight, she had reclaimed herself. Olivia drove aimlessly for a while, letting the sleeping city surround her. She ended up at the home of an old friend she had barely spoken to since getting married. Claudia welcomed her without asking questions, with a long, silent hug that meant more than any words. Olivia settled into the guest room with George and spent her first night in months sleeping, without emotional interruptions. She didn't dream of arguments or tense family gatherings. She only felt the warmth of her son's body next to hers and the certainty that she was exactly where she needed to be, at least for now. Over the next few days, Olivia didn't answer Jared's calls. She sent him a message to let him know George was fine, not to worry, but that she needed time to think. She used that time to do what she had postponed for years: consult a lawyer, review her personal accounts, read about family therapy, and calmly evaluate what she wanted for her future. She checked her bank access, noticed strange activity, and discovered an account Jared had opened without telling her. The anger didn't come as an explosion, but as a quiet confirmation that she had been right to leave. It was as if everything was finally making sense. One afternoon, while George was napping, Olivia found an email from the same lab where she had done the DNA test. It was just a reminder that the results could also be downloaded in digital format. She logged into the platform, downloaded the file, and saved it under a new name in her personal folder, mytruth.pdf. It wasn't a matter of necessity. It was a symbolic way of reaffirming that she hadn't imagined any of it. That every planted doubt, every awkward laugh, and every anxious night had come at a cost. And now she had proof, even for herself, that she had never deserved any of it. Jared finally stopped insisting. On the 6th day, he sent a different kind of message. "I'm ready to talk, however you want, wherever you say." Olivia didn't reply immediately. She read it several times, analyzed every word, and only then asked him to meet at the office of the family therapist she had found. If he wanted to move forward, that would be the starting point. When Jared arrived, he looked like a defeated man. He had lost weight, had dark circles under his eyes, and couldn't maintain eye contact. But Olivia didn't feel pity. She felt distance, an emotional distance that once hurt, but now protected her. The first session with the therapist was tense. Jared tried to begin with a speech of repentance, but Olivia interrupted him firmly. "This isn't about asking for forgiveness. It's about understanding why you did what you did." The therapist nodded silently, and Jared was left speechless for a moment. Olivia spoke little, but every time she did, it was with clarity. She talked about the loneliness, the contempt disguised as jokes, the silent damage left by constant suspicion. Jared listened, his head lowered, offering no excuses. For the first time in a long while, Olivia felt that her voice carried weight. After the session, they walked down the street together in silence. Jared broke it with something she hadn't expected. He confessed that years ago, when George was just a baby, he had thought about doing a paternity test but didn't have the courage. He said that, deep down, he had always known George was his, but fear, combined with his family's comments, filled him with doubt. Olivia didn't respond, not because she had nothing to say, but because she understood that none of it justified the damage. It was too late to change the past. But maybe, just maybe, they could still write a different future, if he was truly willing to do the work. Olivia returned home with George after nearly 2 weeks away. Not because Jared had asked her to, but because she decided it was time to observe things from the high inside, not from a distance. They didn't share a bed, there were no forced hugs, but there were clear rules. Olivia made a list of conditions: financial transparency, weekly therapy, boundaries with the family, and above all, absolute respect for her and her role as a mother. Jared accepted without protest. For the first time, he understood that he was in no position to negotiate. If he wanted to recover anything, he had to rebuild from the ground up. The following days felt strange. Jared tried to bond with George, but the child still showed that distance babies sense without understanding. Olivia watched everything without intervening. She knew the broken bond between father and son couldn't be mended with new toys or improvised affection. Bonds are rebuilt with real presence, with trust and consistency. Jared was starting to understand that. He made breakfast, changed diapers, asked questions he'd never cared about before. Olivia wasn't easily moved. She had learned that effort is the bare minimum, not a favor. George's first birthday arrived faster than Olivia had imagined. She had decided to keep it intimate, with only a few friends and none of Jared's family. He didn't protest. On the contrary, he said he understood and accepted it. Together they prepared a small picnic in the park with balloons, a large blanket, and a simple cake decorated with the child's name. It was the first family event where Olivia felt in control. No need to pretend, no pressure to impress anyone. And for the first time, Jared didn't try to stand out or steal the spotlight. He was just there, simply present. At one point during the gathering, Jared asked to speak. Olivia tensed. She didn't know what he was going to say and didn't like surprises, but he stood up, took a breath, and in front of everyone said he wanted to publicly apologize to the mother of his child. He admitted he had failed, that he had doubted the purest thing he had, and that those doubts had nearly destroyed their family. Olivia looked at him in silence. She didn't clap, she didn't cry, she didn't run to hug him. She just held George firmly in her arms and listened, because she was no longer a woman seeking validation. She was a woman who knew her worth, with or without applause. After the birthday, Olivia felt that something inside her had settled. It wasn't full forgiveness, but it was a closure of sorts. Jared continued attending therapy. Their conversations became more honest, and although the process was slow, she no longer felt trapped. Sometimes she even smiled watching Jared play with George, without checking his phone, without making excuses. But Olivia also understood that an apology, no matter how sincere, didn't erase months of silence, of evasive glances, of contempt disguised as humor. She wasn't there out of blind love, but for her son and for the hope of a different kind of relationship, one built on effort, not illusions. One day, while folding laundry in the bedroom, George crawled to the door and clearly spoke his first word, "Mama!" Olivia froze. A lump formed in her chest, but this time not from sadness. She picked him up in her arms and held him tight. It was as if the universe was confirming that all the pain, all the struggle had been worth it. Not for Jared, not for his family, but for that little soul who had seen her endure, break in silence, and begin again. George would grow up knowing that his mother never stayed silent, that yes, she had been afraid, but she had never surrendered to the cowardice of others. Jared's parents tried to reconnect weeks later, sending a gift for George and asking to visit him. Olivia didn't respond right away. She thought about every hurtful phrase disguised as advice, Every complicit glance when Daisy launched her attacks, the comfortable silence with which they had allowed doubt to tear her apart from the inside. Finally, she wrote them a short but clear message. "You'll be able to see George when you understand that being family is not enough. You have to act like it." She wasn't seeking punishment, only respect. The kind of respect she had never received from them and now demanded without hesitation. As for Daisy, she disappeared completely. No one heard from her again in the family circles. Olivia didn't ask, nor did she feel curious. She had learned that some people don't change. They simply hide when they lose power. She no longer feared her. Not Daisy, nor the idea of being alone, because she had discovered that being alone wasn't the problem. The truly lonely thing was being surrounded by people who invalidate you. Now she had a different network, friends who listened, a therapist she could confide in, and above all, the inner strength that had been dormant for years. Olivia began to reclaim the parts of herself she had set aside. She resumed online classes, returned to her passion for photography, and started sharing content on social media about real motherhood, unfiltered. Her voice, once silenced by fear and the need to fit in, now resonated with women who saw themselves in her story. Each message of support felt like an emotional bandage. It wasn't about fame or likes, but about healing through sharing. Jared, initially bewildered by this new version of Olivia, came to understand that he no longer had a submissive wife. He had a whole woman beside him. One night, while putting away George's toys together, Jared asked her if she thought she would ever be able to fully forgive him. Olivia didn't respond right away. She looked at him calmly and said, "I don't know, but I've learned to forgive myself for allowing so much for so long." Jared nodded, like someone finally accepting that the damage done can't be erased with just a conversation. In that moment, Olivia felt that their relationship was somewhere new. Not in the past, nor in the romantic ideal she once imagined. They were building something else. Something where she was no longer a spectator, but the protagonist.